I chose this landscape because the street had a huge impact on my life while I was living abroad. Although the street never truly provoked a mathematical experience for me, looking back at it now and looking at the term definitions, I can see so many components in which are great connections from my non-mathematical experiences to my mathematical knowledge from this course. The 8 terms that I decided to use and include in my landscape are add-on, cardinality, conservation of quantity, counting backwards, magnitude, one-to-one correspondence, splitting, and unitizing. My first term is add-on, and it's on the buildings in the middle by the brown and blue house, and I just felt like all the components of the house was a great representation of this term. My example for this was during snack time we have a whiteboard where the children are able to look at the portion sizes that they're able to serve themselves. For afternoon snack, I was talking with Sasha, and she asked me how many more graham crackers she could have. So I told her to look at the whiteboard and see what it said. She responded, "I only have one, but I'm still hungry, Miss Madeline." I said, "Okay, well, how many does it say on the board that you can have?" And so she responded, "It says I can have 3. So I responded by asking her again how many more she needed to grab to get to that. She excitedly said, "I need 2 more. Oh, good. I'm hungry." So she represented knowing that the amount she had, and then the amount she could still have, adding those on, represented this term correctly. My next term is cardinality, and it's located on the left-hand side of the picture, towards the end of the row of houses, and I felt like this was a good representation of being at the end, representing the last number. So for my example for this one was, while we were reading a book about what 10 dots can make, one of my kids, Nico, he didn't really count in numerical order, but he was able to end on the correct number. So when we were counting, he started at 23 and he ended at 10. So the correct answer was 10, and he knew that that was the answer. Although he started at 23, we were still able to understand that the last number was 10. My next term is conservation of quantity, and this is located on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. For this term, I thought that it was a good representation to be put in the water because the water in Denmark changes states and all different types of seasons. So for this one, I used an example with one of my students, Sasha. So during lunch, Sasha made an observation on our new cups that we had in comparison to our older cups. We had just gotten new cups first because we didn't have enough for all the kids, because the kids sometimes throw them away. And the new cups we got were a little bit larger than the original cups we had. And she recognized that they were wider. So when I asked her to pour water in one cup and then to pour the water into the new cup, I then asked her which one had more water. She responded, "Miss Madeline, they have the same amount. I didn't add more water to the new cup. I just poured it," with a very amused smile on her face. So with this, she was able to understand that although the 2 different physical changes in the cups did not affect the actual change in water. My 4th term is counting backwards, and it's right above the second term, cardinality. So I thought that counting backwards was also a good place to be put on the left hand of the screen because it's at the end, and from there we can count backwards to the very beginning of the houses on the right hand side. So for my example for this one was with one of my students, Shayla. So Shayla was telling me how she has a little sister who is 1. I asked her how much older she was, being the older sister and her being 3. Together we counted backwards to discover she is 2 years older than her sister. I then asked her how much older she is going to be than when the baby that's in mommy's tummy, and she goes, 3, 2, 1, Miss Madeline, I'll be 3 years older. Excited by her new discovery, she ran around telling all her friends the news of her being 3 years older. So by this, we were able to count from the age she's at down to what the age of the baby in the mommy's tummy is. My 5th term is magnitude, and it's located in the middle of the screen right by the first white ship you see. So for this one, I used a personal experience. When I was a child, I was obsessed with making mud pies and how big I could make them. I remember one day I made the biggest one I had ever done and screamed for my brother to come look at it. When he finally came out to look at it, we instantly began comparing who can make the biggest mud pie. Of course, because we were both so competitive, this competition lasted forever, seeing whose mud pie had the most magnitude, being largest in size. Obviously, I won. The next term is one-to-one correspondence, and it's located in the top right corner in the sky. I used this term because I felt that it was a good representation above all the houses and right above the boats and all that. It was able to show differences in the objects. When I was little, I was very obsessive over my toys, and I did not like to have any more or any less than 3. I always had to have 3 toys, 3 objects, whatever it was. I was very fixated on the number 3. So regardless of what the toy was, I needed to have those 3 objects. There was a time, however, where my best friend wanted to borrow one of my toys, and of course my mom made me share. And I was so upset because I no longer had the 3 toys. It wasn't really the fact that I couldn't or that I had to give up one of those toys, being like particular about that object, but it was the fact that I no longer had the quantity of 3. However, for some reason, my best friend gave me a plastic spoon. Apparently, it was the first thing that she had seen from her site, her environment, and so once I got that, I was fine afterwards because I had obtained my 3 objects again. It never really had anything to do with the actual object itself, but the fact of the quantity I had. So I was able to see, okay, I have 1, 2, 3, the one-to-one correspondence, but I didn't really have a relation to the objects, if they were similar or not. They could be different. My 7th term is splitting, and it's located in between the 2 yellow houses, kind of to the left of the center in the middle of the page. My example for this is a personal one. So when I was younger, I had the hardest time when learning to count and then being able to say the number in the word format, because breaking the numbers into place values didn't really make sense to me. I couldn't really wrap my head around it. It wasn't until my teacher broke it down for me and I finally was able to understand the place values, where I was able to visibly see the numbers broken up with the written words underneath them. I was sitting in the 3rd row and the 2nd seat back when I had that aha moment, and since then I haven't had trouble with being able to say large numbers like 1,347. So how she was able to get me to wrap my head around this was she would write the number for, like, say 243, and she would have me then go, okay, 200 plus 40 plus 3, and write those words underneath it. So 200, then I'd write 200, then I would write 40, and then 3, and that's how I was able to say it, because I had such a hard time with actually saying the word, or the number I should say, without being able to just read it. My last and eighth term is unitizing, and it's located in the top left-hand corner of the page. I think this is a constant and recurring experience for everyone, of being able to quickly recognize a smaller group or portion of a certain object. It's kind of hard for me to think of one particular occurrence of experiencing unitizing, but I remember being extremely intrigued by dice and counting how many dots are on a single side in 6th grade. The formation of the dice were almost embedded into my brain, and if I thought of a number between 1 and 6, I was able to visualize the dot formation for that number in my head, and was always able to quickly announce a quantity based on that formation. So if someone told me 6, I was able to just visually, whenever that number came up, I was able to visually see the 6 dot formation of a dice in my head. So these were my 8 terms, and I feel that these are all represented onto this street in Copenhagen, Denmark, the Nyhavn Street, and I felt that overall it was a nice experience to be able to compare the new mathematical definitions and be able to compare them to a landscape that had so much meaning to me. You're able to realize how the simplest things can represent a variety of definitions, concepts, whatever the case may be. So these were my 8 terms, and I hope you enjoyed my landscape.